In this video, we're going to go through the process of creating a wizard. And that was one of the classes that was requested, so I figured I would focus on that next before I get into the other base classes that are introduced by the player's handbook. So, with the wizard, there aren't really that many new war domains, or in this case, it's the arcane traditions, if you will, that are introduced through many of the supplements. In fact, Xanathar's is the only one that I have at the moment that introduces the war magic arcane tradition. The rest of these traditions on the far right are ones that are introduced by the player's handbook, and they're the basic ones. I mean, many of you who've been playing D&D for a while will recognize pretty much all of them, if not all of them. As a result, unlike other classes, the way that this class is created is a little bit different due to the arcane tradition, because you choose that arcane tradition a little bit earlier than you do than you choose the martial archetypes, for example, for the fighter class. And I believe it kicks off at level 2, as opposed to at level 3. In addition, your saving throw values are going to be based off of your intelligence and wisdom attributes. You get a spell slot table to indicate how many spells per level you acquire. You also get an increase in cantrips that you know as you level up, in addition to gaining a few features as you acquire all of your particular skills. And you'll note that there is no, as you acquire all of your levels. And you can note here that there is no martial archetype that is applied as you level through, like there would be with a particular fighter class. In addition to that, you have a different way that you deal with spells. So spellcasting is, for a wizard and a mage, pretty much are learned as you go forward. And they're based on your attributes in a couple of ways. So, for example, your saving throws are based off of your intelligence modifier. So what that means is that when you attack a creature that then triggers a saving throw, your intelligence plus the value of 8 plus your proficiency bonus dictate what that value is they have to roll against in order to succeed or fail. You have the ability to ritualistically cast a spell. And when you do that, you don't expend the spell, and you don't have to have that spell prepared because you're literally reading it out of your spell book. You can make use of a spellcasting focus instead of having to have all of the spell components readily at hand in a spell pouch or a component pouch or anything like that. You do, however, have to prepare your spells, and the preparation, or rather the number of spells that you can prepare, is based on the following things. It's based on your intelligence modifier plus your wizard level. So if you were level 1 and you have a +1 bonus to your intelligence, you can only prepare 2 spells. If you are level 10 and you have a +4 bonus to your intelligence, you can prepare 14 spells. And that would mean that you would have 14 spells that you could cast during an encounter or for whatever event you happen to need. Cantrips are outside of that realm. The way a cantrip works is that it's like a free spell. You have spent so much time learning and studying that particular spell that it is literally burnt into your memory. You cannot forget it unless you decide to change the cantrip. Then I suppose you could choose to forget it at that point, but I actually don't think you can actually change out a cantrip once you've selected them. It doesn't. I've never actually read a statement that actually states that. So the way cantrips work is that you can cast them at will, and you don't have to have them prepared in advance. But at the same time, it still follows the rules of spellcasting, in the sense that during a combat encounter, your action would be that you're casting a spell, whether it's a cantrip or not. That still costs time to cast unless it's a bonus action or a reaction, as they tend to be quicker. So spellcasting is a little bit different than a standard fighter type or rogue type character. In addition, There is a fighter class called Eldritch Knight if you wish to be able to combine fighting and spellcasting, although a limited amount of it, into one without having to worry about multiclassing. So that is an option for you. And there are other classes out there that are like that. Wizards, in this case, cast spells that fall within the wizard repertoire, if you will, starting with your cantrips, and they go through all the way pretty much to level 9. And as you can see, there's definitely a few here that are very potent spells, if you will, based on the amount of damage that they can do and all that jazz. So I'm going to leave that open because we will be needing that. And as I have stated with previous character creation video, specifically with the fighter class video, the first thing you're going to want to do is the following. You're going to want to make sure that you have your class chosen. You're going to want to know in advance what your race is going to be. And you're going to want to know in advance what your character background is going to be. And what I mean by that is that you must understand your class in the sense that you know what you're going to choose. In this case, we're choosing the wizard. You must understand, they moved the races button on me. All right, let's see. Is there an all here? All. Okay, so I already have all, so create PC. Let's narrow it down to that. There we go. Races. So you need to understand what your character race is going to be. And for the purpose of this particular tutorial, I'm going to use the human race, and I'm only doing that to keep it consistent with the rest of the videos that I've done. In fact, I'll probably use the human race for all of the characters that I do. So, but humans aren't necessarily the best race for being a magic user. You don't necessarily get specific bonuses to your intelligence or wisdom, depending on the domain you've chosen. I think in the case of wizard, it's mostly intelligence as your primary attribute. You don't necessarily get a bonus to that right off the get-go. Now, human gets a bonus to all 6 of the attributes that are here. But an elf, for example, who's typically considered one of the more magically inclined races, they typically get a dexterity increase. There are gnomes, I think they get intelligence increases. I think it's intelligence. Yeah, intelligence by 2, things like that. So there are definitely different races that are more appropriate to being a spellcaster, but I'm just going to set that aside because literally it's not going to affect the rest of the discussion of the class itself. And I will do a video on all the different races. The next thing that you'll want to make sure that you choose is a background. And this should be the buttons that you see in the off chance that you're going through and creating a character. If you don't see this exact list, then just click on this library button and click on this create PC like I showed you a little bit earlier. Now the backgrounds, you're definitely going to want to look at something that is more applicable to the wizard class. And what I mean by that is that there are backgrounds that benefit the wizard's class. And the one that I'm specifically thinking of in this case is the sage. And the reason for that is that off the get-go, you get the Arcana and history checks, which are highly useful for a wizard being able to potentially comprehend or read specific symbols that they might come across in a particular dungeon, or in a castle or library, or in a book that they might be studying, things like that. And it gives them that little extra bonus to being able to more proficiently work their way through it. Identifying what those things are and understanding what they are. And additionally, you get the researcher background feature. And that complements that and can help you in understanding more knowledge that might be in more inaccessible places. So you'll be able to recall, for example, oh yeah, in relation to that particular event, I recall reading that the library of blah, blah, blah potentially has a book that might reference this particular thing because of the research that you might have done as you were learning for your background and learning your wizardry capabilities. So I'm going to choose Sage in this case because it will complement this particular character quite well, even though I don't plan on using it anywhere right at the moment. The next thing to do, and I'm just going to simply move these over to here so that they are out of the way. Interesting that that is not giving me, there we go. Every once in a while there's a bit of an issue here, and I just want to clear that slot. I want to save these for later, so I don't need, yeah, I don't need these because I got that one over there. All right. So I've covered this already in the advanced dice rolling tutorial, as well as the fighter class tutorial, but there's an easy way to go about rolling dice. And essentially, you're essentially telling Fantasy Grounds that you want to go through and roll 4d6, drop the lowest. There we go. It can sometimes be a bit tricky to grab that out of the chat box and drop it into place. And what that does is that eliminates the need for you to have to mathematically figure out rolling 4 die, drop 1, or go through the whole process of, okay, I've got a maximum number of this points, where do I put them, that kind of thing. And some DMs will unfortunately go that route. And you tend to get a little bit more of a well-balanced character when you do it that way, although you can completely skew a character. So the way that I tend to typically run it within my campaigns is that you roll 4d6 and you drop the lowest die. And then what that does is that can give you a maximum of 18, but a good reach, or range rather, of values within it. Although I have seen situations where I've had characters, including characters I've created, roll a 3. So luck can still come into play in a lot of ways. Now, we want a high intelligence. We are going to probably want possibly charisma is our next one. No, in this case they're looking at constitution or dexterity. Now, constitution check, a high constitution would be great because it will help you better resist concentration checks. So if you're casting a spell that requires concentration and you get hit, the higher your constitution, the better chance you have of succeeding against that particular attack. Additionally, dexterity can be beneficial because it can allow you to potentially dodge things a little bit better, things like that. If you're ever curious as to why they recommend this, generally in the quick build, they give you a character that will maximize your abilities. So they tell you what is your primary stat, which in this case is intelligence, and give you an option between secondary stats. And secondary stats can come down to your arcane traditions. And you're going to want to have an idea as to what your arcane tradition is going to be before you choose it. And I typically choose an evoker when I do characters. And the reason for that is because I love fireballs. Absolutely love them. And fireball is an evocation spell. Abjuration is a good complementary school for that. But with 5th edition, there really isn't as much of a limitation for being able to choose spells that are in a school that is completely opposite to the school you have selected. There are some restrictions, but not as many as there were in things like 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, for example, or advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They had a lot of spells you just simply couldn't choose depending on the school that you selected. So in this case, I'm going to create an evocation based wizard. And a lot of people love fireballs, so I have a funny feeling that part of the video will be quite popular. So, now that we've got most of that information sorted through, it is now time to, I'm just going to close down the Xanthars thing. It is now time to roll the abilities, and I hope I get good ones this time. So, now that I've created this, I can literally click it 6 times, and Fantasy Grounds will do the rest for me. Not great, not bad. I've at least got a good intelligence. So literally all I have to do is drag and drop that right into there. I don't have to do any other kind of calculation whatsoever. I'm going to drop the 14 into Constitution. And I'm going to drop the 12 into the Dexterity. The rest I am going to drop into the remaining skills. The odds are that I get 3 11s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, okay. So everything has now been assigned. And you want to do that in place before you even consider dropping anything into your character sheet from a class, background, or race perspective. And the reason for that is that now you've set up Fantasy Grounds to automatically calculate the bonuses. So if you decide to choose Elf as the class that you want to use for this, the dexterity is automatically going to get 2 added to it when you drop the race into it. Same with the human. All of these stats are going to increase by 1. And I'm kind of lucky that I got a 17 there because that means that I'm going to get an 18 for intelligence. And as you can see, every single one of those stats came up. And you'll see some other things that got dropped into place. Nothing right yet, really, except in the language, or for your features or anything, except for the languages. And we'll come to that in a moment. There's no inventory, and there are no actions that have come into play here just yet. Essentially, you've just dropped in the race, and you've told Fantasy Grounds what it is that you're going to do. If you're curious, the race tabs typically have name suggestions. So if you wanted to play, for example, a samurai, if you decide to take the fighter class, while it's not necessarily guaranteed to be a requirement to be an Asian class in that particular case, or race in that particular case, you can do so if you wish to choose to do so. And you can choose the names that are based off of that. And you can actually modify this once you've dropped it in to include human and in brackets a subrace if you've decided to choose that particular aspect of it and go into that level of detail. Generally, I don't require my players to do that. I let them go as far as they want to go. The background should not be dropped into place just yet, but you are going to want to be aware of what skills you're going to acquire as part of that background. And the reason for that is, even though it's technically min-maxing, you still want to be able to get the best advantage of your character that you can out of it. And when I drop the wizard class into place, I'm going to be able to choose from these particular skills here. So 2 of those skills are already going to be provided by the Sage background. So I don't need to worry about those 2, which means I can have an option of one of these, or this group, and I get to choose 2 from them. So that means that I can choose Insight, Investigation, Medicine, and Religion. This character is not going to be so much of a healer, so I'm probably going to choose Insight and Investigation, as they will complement the wizardry capabilities down the road when you're trying to work your way through a puzzle or anything like that. Okay, so the next thing to do is to drop the class into place. We've got the race in place. We want to drop the class into place. What that's going to do is trigger our skill requirement. And as I said, I'm probably going to choose these 2. You'll note that we didn't choose anything from here just yet. That's typically because we haven't really, we're still in the early stages of our character, so we really haven't decided on a school per se when it comes to making use of your level 1 character. That comes into play later. And then finally, you want to drag in your background. And what that will do is you will see now that we have Arcana, History, Insight, and Investigation skills as being our proficient skills. And you'll see that we have a +6 to all of those. And they're all Wisdom or Intelligence based, except this one has a +3, which is still good. And that's because our Wisdom is a 12. Over time, as you level, you will be able to get additional ability skill improvements, but you don't get as many as you got with the fighter. Yeah, so you're getting an arcane traditional feature as opposed to another ability score improvement at level 6, whereas with a fighter, you would have received another ability score improvement, but you'd also be receiving martial archetype skills and fighter skills a little bit more frequently. Okay, so we are now ready. Now, one other thing I want to point out, I did point this out in the fighter class, is that this is a verbose description of everything that you are going to make use of, including the table here. This is a quick access summary. So if there are 2 tabs here, one is Other, and the primary one is Main. And even though they're calling them arcane traditions, these schools are technically your class specialization. But I'm going to start with the Evoker, as that will be the most popular specialization that is chosen, and then I'll start introducing the others. Excuse me. So with that in mind, I am going to temporarily add a portrait just so that I can differentiate this if I include this. Oops, I don't want that. I don't want that either. There it is. Human. And there's quite a few portraits in here, so it takes a few minutes. And let's see, human. Let's go for the weird one. All right, and let's see, anything in here? Now I know I can type human in here, but for some reason it doesn't search through the heroic character boxes, so I don't know why that's the case. That would be a monk. Warlock. I'll use the warlock one for now. No, that actually technically is a different case, so we'll just use mage for now. There we go. All right, kind of goes along with that. So I've got the background into place, but I don't want to close this out just yet. And the reason for that is that there are some things here that we'll still want to look at. So what we've got right now is a name, our tokens, our abilities in place. We have all of our saving throws in place. We have not, as of yet, selected a spells just yet. And I might make that a... All right, so these two are potentially ones that we'll want to add to the action page. And just for simplicity to tell the DM that yes, I am using this skill or feature. All right, so common is a language that we know by default. Languages are typically found underneath the player's handbook, under the reference manual, and I always do it this way because it's just easier to search, provided you can spell the search word that you're looking for correctly. And languages, there we go. And if you're ever curious, you can pop that out so you don't have to keep those windows open. And these would be considered the standard languages here. And who would typically speak them? But because we're building a wizard, it's entirely possible that during their schooling, they had the ability to, or the option to learn a more exotic language. In this case, maybe Sylvan, maybe Undercommon, maybe Abyssal if they were planning on dealing with demons at some point, and maybe Draconic. For the most part, though, they're going to want to choose these. And elves are typically considered the race most attuned to magic. Same with gnomes to a certain degree. I'm not going to base this particular individual out of a given area, so I'm going to use Common as the language of choice, and I'm going to give him both Abyssal and Draconic. Oh, looks like I get to choose 4. Draconic, and then I will choose Elvish as the second one. Okay, so I've now got my languages in place. Under inventory, we'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to jump down to the abilities page, and nothing is here because I haven't loaded anything in. I'm going to drop Arcane Recovery into here. Oops, I got to do it down here. Okay, maybe not. Ah, okay. Yeah, this should be a an ability that you can make use of. I probably have to get some weapons in there before it will... Oh, wait, there it is. Duh. I was just scrolled down too far. All right. So, Arcane Recovery. Once per day when you finish a short rest, you can choose expended spell slots to recover. Okay. So, this is a... For some reason, that white screen there, Fantasy Grounds was going a little bit nuts. Not sure why, but I'm going to close it down here in a moment and reset it and just see if it clears anything out. But before I do that, I want to get Arcane Recovery set up. So Arcane Recovery is something that you can use after a short rest. And you can do it once per day when you finish a short rest. Once per day when you finish your short rest. So if you use it twice, yeah, okay, so it's once daily. Even though you're using it during a short rest, you still only have the ability to use it once throughout the course of that particular day. So what this means is that when you have burned through all of your spell slots, which for some reason aren't being shown yet, you have the ability to recover one of those spell slots at during a short rest. But you can't do that again until the next day, is essentially what this is saying. So I've set this up so that you have to literally take a long rest. So if you see here I'm taking short rest, it's not working. You have to take a long rest in order for that to function. And which is perfect. That's the way that we want to do it. Now this one is really, I'm going to drag it into here, but for the purposes of it being a means of telling the dungeon master that you're going to use that ability. So I'm going to throw both of these. Well, one I'm going to throw under wizard for the class, and this I'm going to throw under sage for the background because that's where it came from. And now that what that has the ability to do is I can now use this as part of my role-playing aspect, and I say, okay, I'm going to use with my researcher skill there, DM, is there anything that I can find around blah? And then you click that. And that tells the DM that you're actively using that particular ability. And that's the way that I like to play it. Now the next thing that I have to do is choose my spells. And there, we finally fixed the missing spell slots there. So, to figure that out, you need to do two things. One, you're going to want to look through your spell book here. So at first level, you create a spell book containing 6 first level wizard spells of your choice. So initially, you can create 6 first level spells or add 6 first level spells into your spell book. They don't have to be of the school that you were intending to study under, specifically your arcane tradition. That comes into play at level 2. But it helps if you're thinking ahead in that respect. And you'll see what I mean by that if we decide to go through some of the other schools here. So there is another thing that I need to know as well, is how many cantrips I get at level 1, and that is 3. So that is visible on your wizard's sheet in the main table there. And here is where you can find out how many skills or how many spells you can actually make use of. And for some reason I can't select that, and that's read only, so I can't change that. Okay, so I'm going to choose 3 cantrips first, and then I will move on to the first level spells. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to just minimize that for now. Mage Hand. And let's see, light is usually useful. This guy's a human, so he's not going to be able to see in dark areas. Alright, now this is going to be an evoker. So I'm going to choose Burning Hands. Chromatic Orbs, always useful. Detect Magic. And I'm just going to minimize those for now, just so that they don't take up so much room. So that's 3. I am going to take Identify. Mage Armor is always good, and is there Shield? Shield would be the last one. Gotta be defensible. All right, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So, okay. So, what you can prepare for spells, you're going to want to look on your spellcasting tab, or page rather, and here you go. You prepare the list of wizard spells that are available to you to cast. To do so, choose a number of wizard spells from your spellbook equal to your intelligence modifier plus your wizard level to a minimum of 1 spell. So if you have no bonus, you get 1. The spell must be of a level for which you have spell slots. So in this case, out of the 6 spells that I have in my spellbook, I can choose 5 of them, because I have a +4 to my intelligence bonus, and my level is 1. Excuse me, so that gives me 5 spells that I can actually set as prepared. And you do that by switching this button. You can left click on that. It'll switch it to the preparation tab, or state rather, and then so I'm preparing to do damage. This identify spell, if I have to, I can literally take 10 minutes during a rest period and cast that spell as a ritual, because it is a ritual spell. And it gives me the ability to make use of that spell even though I don't have it prepared. These are the ones that I'm most likely going to use during an encounter or going through a dungeon. I'm going to need that to react to things. I may need that for protection, and I want to be able to do some damage to somebody if they're going to be attacking me, that kind of thing. This, it's kind of ancillary. I'm not going to be in the middle of a dungeon and trying to figure out what the heck a particular item is, if it's magic or anything like that. I'm going to want to do that when it's safe to do so. I mean, that's what a wizard does. They go in, they get what they want, they take it back, and then they look at it at it later. They take the time to research it. Every now and then, a wizard might have to go through and identify something in a pinch, but chances are that's not going to be at level 1. And then my firebolt, my lightning or my light cantrip, and my mage hand cantrip, I can literally cast at will. So outside of combat, I can constantly keep light going. So the minute it dies out, I can cast it again. The minute it dies out, I can cast it again. Mage hand, I can use it to open chests, open doors, pick something up off the floor as long as it doesn't exceed a certain amount of weight. Reach up to the ceiling to grab at something that might be stuck in it, that kind of thing. And again, I can do that at will. It's not something that requires me to have that prepared in advance. And Firebolt, that's your last-ditch spell. You've burnt through all of these spells. You have nothing left for what you have for spell slots. In this case, I only have 2 anyway. So Firebolt is a spell that you can just cast every single turn. And in a lot of ways, most people will just simply use, or most wizards will just simply use Firebolt and save these more powerful spells, even though they're level 1, for a boss mob, like the level 1 boss that you might run into, or a level 2 boss that you might run into, things like that. They'll use these in the most dire of situations. And granted, there are players out there that will use them right off, and that's fine. It comes down to how do you want to play the actual class. So now that we've got our spells chosen, we can look into our equipment. And that is going to be under the inventory section here. And something I forgot to set up are the coin rates, or coin types rather. So in case you're unsure, maybe you haven't seen 5th edition before, this is platinum pieces, gold pieces, electrum pieces, silver pieces, and copper pieces. If you need to understand how they work, then you can go to the Player's Handbook, click on Reference Manual, expand it out, and search for coins. And select the wealth category here. And it gives you a table on the conversion rate. This is typically what it looks like. Every world, if you will, has their own style to the coins. So Eberron might have a different style from the Forgotten Realms, which might have a different style from Ravenloft, which might have a different style from the New World that was just released not too long ago. I can't remember the name of it. Wow, my brain is shot today. but you're never really going to see the design associated with those coins unless it happens to be a special part of the module. But what is important are the exchange rates. So if you think with US dollars or Canadian dollars, for most of the coins here, then you'll understand how the currency is exchanged. So for 10 silver pieces gives you a copper piece. So you can think of the copper piece as a penny. You can think of the silver piece as a dime. An electrum piece could be 2 quarters, although I think there might be a 50 pence piece that used to exist, if it doesn't already still exist in the UK, for example. The gold piece can be equivalent to $1, and the platinum piece could be equivalent to $10. So that's how this averages out. So to get a silver piece from 10 copper pieces is how you get that. To get an electrum piece, you need 50 copper pieces. To get a gold piece, you need 100 copper pieces. To get a platinum piece, you need 10,000 or 1,000 copper pieces. That might be $100. No, it's $10. Silver pieces, it's the reverse. You get 10 copper pieces for every silver piece. You get 1 silver piece for 1 silver piece. You get 1/5 of an electrum piece for 1 silver piece, so on and so forth. And you can use this table to actually go through and measure things out when it comes to trying to figure out what the exchange rates are. In a lot of ways, when you're at a pub or a bar, you and the DM are going to be dealing with maybe silver pieces and copper pieces. Unless you're at an expensive inn or a bar, then it'll probably be gold pieces and silver pieces. And if you're an extremely wealthy inn or a bar, you're probably going to be dealing with platinum pieces and gold pieces. Platinum for the rooms and gold for the food and whatnot. Yes, I don't think I've ever seen an inn that expensive, but it gives you an idea as to where you'll potentially run into that. Buying items, for example, you'll typically go and trade with copper or gold pieces for expensive items, or platinum pieces in that respect, but you're not necessarily going to be dealing with copper or silver pieces that often. There are some general things that you'll be buying for prices like that, but for the most part, you'll be dealing with the first three: copper, silver, and gold pieces. Platinum pieces are typically when you're carrying too many gold pieces and you're converting it to reduce the weight. Or you might just find it in the loot, things like that. The equipment that we want to deal with is in the lower portion of the wizard class screen or sheet. And you want to focus on the equipment area, and it's below the proficiencies section. And you'll want to pay attention to the proficiencies at this time as well. The reason for that is that it might dictate what it is that you are going to choose to carry with you as equipment for offensive weaponry and potentially defensive capabilities as well. So in this case, for example, we have a choice between a quarterstaff and a dagger. I know a few mages that typically walk around with daggers, but I rarely know wizards that typically walk around without a quarterstaff, and sometimes vice versa. But generally, whenever I've dealt with a wizard, they have a quarterstaff. Generally, when I've dealt with a mage, they have mostly daggers, sometimes a quarterstaff. And there may be different options there as well. But in this case, I'm going to choose a quarterstaff. Now, to get to the equipment, conveniently, the player's handbook version of the class sheet will always provide links to the 4 equipment tables that are available within Fantasy Grounds. And what they are is they pull together all of the tables from the player's handbook and reduce them into these 4 sets. So I'm going to open up the weapon table. I'm going to open up the armor table, despite the fact that we're probably not going to need it. I'm going to need the adventuring gear and the tools. So I'm just going to set those aside and move them there. So the first one that we're going to want to deal with here is the quarterstaff. And that is a simple melee weapon, which means typically anybody can carry it. And all I want to do is drag and drop that into the inventory page, and it will automatically throw it there. It will also automatically equip it. That's what this icon here means. So it's either not carried, carried, or equipped. it has a weight value, and the location can be where you're actually carrying it. So you might be carrying it, for example, in your right hand. That'll become more applicable when you're dealing with the backpack that you're going to get here in a few minutes. So we'll get to that once we get to that. Any other weapons that are going to come under here? No. What about the background? Did I close the Sage? I did. So I'm going to pop open the Sage here. Just throw it up there for now. Okay. Knife is not classified as a weapon. Okay. So I do not need the weapons table anymore, but I'm going to move that back down here. Now, when it comes to armor, I'm not really getting anything. So I don't need that. That can go away. My equipment table, however, my adventuring gear is where I'm going to find most of this stuff. So this is where you as a player have to make a decision. Do you want to use an arcane focus, which means that you can cast spells without requiring the arcane component for those spells, except for spells that have a $ value associated with them? Typically, for example, when you see something like this, that means that you have the ability to use this with an arcane focus. However, when you take a look at Identify, it has a gem with a gold value associated with it. That might require you to potentially have that particular item on hand. The owl feather will come from the focus, but this might require you to have that item on hand. But there is a more definitive way to indicate that, and that is actually within the player's handbook, or to determine that rather, and that's within the player's handbook. And you'll find that the player's handbook is going to be most useful for anyone who has just started getting into D&D. And what you're going to want to do is look for spellcasting and pull up that category. And it's a whole section, so I'm going to pull this open so that I can just simply drag things around. All right. So with that, what is a spell? Where's a spell? Known and prepared. Spell slot. So you can see a lot of the information that we're going over is already in here. What I am looking for... There should be a section here that tells you how to make use of components. Okay. So it didn't explain that there. Just one sec. Let me find out where it is. So it took a few minutes, but I did manage to find it. It's under the components category here. And if you look for the casting a spell category at the top, it's on that same page within the player's handbook. And if you have the physical copy, it's on page 203. So, verbal means you're speaking it. Semantic means you're gesturing. It's the material component here. And essentially what it means is casting some spells require particular objects specified in parentheses in the component entry. A character can use a component pouch or spellcasting focus, which we're going to choose from, in place of a component specified for a spell. But if a cost is indicated for a component, so when we looked at the Identify spell, there was a cost specified for this pearl. Excuse me. That means you have to have a pearl worth 100 gold pieces in order to be able to cast that particular spell. If a spell states that a material component is consumed by the spell, the caster must provide this component for each casting of the spell. Now, in the case of Identify, it doesn't state whether it's consumed. Yeah, so it doesn't state whether it's consumed. And what that means is that you can buy a single pearl worth 100 gold pieces, and as long as you don't lose it, you can continue to cast the Identify spell going forward. And that's literally it. Okay, So that covers that particular side of things. So let's go to the adventuring gear here, and I am going to choose an arcane focus. And these are the arcane foci that I can choose from. So a crystal, an orb, a rod, a staff, or a wand. That's actually a tough question. In this case, I'm actually going to choose a crystal. Oops, that should be inventory. I haven't used a crystal before, so this could be kind of fun. And as you can see, it's now part of the inventory. So what's next? A scholar's pack or an adventurer's pack. That is still going to be on the adventuring gear, but it's going to be under equipment packs. And most likely I'm going to choose the scholar's pack simply because this particular character has the sage background. And it includes these things here. Okay, now one thing, and it has added a book, but that is a book of lore. So I'm just going to go of lore. I don't know why they don't do that in advance. Ink pen, 10 sheets of parchment to allow you to copy spells, for example, a little bag of sand, and a knife. So it has included the bag of sand and the knife. Okay. Now we're not quite done with the adventuring gear table because there might be something here as well. So black ink. All right, so we already have a 1 ounce bottle of ink. But is there another bottle here? No. So what I'm going to do is drag another bottle of ink into place. And what that should do is automatically increment that particular bottle. So the sage, you also get this equipment, which means it's going to complement the equipment that you have. So a quill. I don't know if a quill is here. No, so they don't have a quill there. What about here? No, okay. So, they say ink pen. What I'm going to do is drag that into place and then change it over to be a quill. So I'm at, crap, I forgot I was going to do that. All right, so quill will make it weigh the same amount as the ink pen, which is 0.02. And there, okay. So that takes care of that. A small knife, so we'll have a second knife here. A letter from a dead colleague is something you actually have to add as an item. And all I'm doing here to add a new line is hitting the enter key. And you can actually go through and create, for example, an actual item here and actually call it a letter from a dead colleague and drop that into place. That is also possible. Where'd that go? Up there. Let's say it weighs the same amount as the quill. Paper's fairly light. A set of common clothes. Okay, so clothes are also on the adventurers table here. So common clothes here. A belt pouch containing 10 gold pieces. So we'll add 10 gold pieces here. And I believe there is a pouch available. POU. There we go. Okay. And that pretty much finishes this. We do need a spell book, so we need a book. Ooh, in this case, they actually have a spell book. And we are done from this particular book here. Now you'll note that we really didn't get any tools from this particular class, and that's okay. The Sage also really doesn't give us any tools. So we don't need the tools table open anymore. And now we don't need the background for the Sage background. Ooh, actually, we kind of do. I forgot about the personalities. But before I get to that, what I'm going to do is update my inventory so it's a little bit more organized. Oops, nope. So this one's going to be in the backpack. Backpack, worn. That'll be used more frequently, so... So typically, if you're going to be carrying something, I'd want it left. Let's go left pocket. I'd want to know where it is as a DM, and there's a reason for that. And spellbook, we don't really have a pouch for it, so I'll throw it in the backpack for now. The reason for that is as follows. If I drop this backpack right here, all the items that are in it go with it. And that is great, because if you, as a player, have to go through the process of, let's say, swimming through a wet area, a lake or somewhere in the cavern or in a damp cavern or something like that, you don't want that any of the contents in that backpack to get wet, you can take it off and leave it out at the entrance. And when you come back out, you can pick it back up and you're carrying everything. But what happens here is when you take that backpack off, your weight drops. The total amount of weight that you're carrying absolutely drops off. If you put it back on, all the items that add up that weight are now there again, which is great because it also gives me the option as a DM to maybe come in and have a goblin steal your backpack while you're sleeping. Nobody noticed that it happened. Well, now all the equipment that's in there, including your spellbook, are now gone. And that gives me a way to hook an adventure into the party when I'm looking for something that might be a little bit more random. And I'm just going to put Warren on for the backpack. All right, so that completes the inventory. So let's go to the notes. And we're hitting a situation again. Really? Okay, there we go. If that happens and you get a blank screen, just use the scroll mouse or scroll wheel on your mouse rather, and kick that off. All right. So I want to load up some personality traits here, and I want to be able to make it a little bit random for me. Yeah, okay. That sounds like something a wizard would brag about. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to just drag this. So if you make a roll off of a table, you can actually just pick the item up and drag it around. Just saves you having to manually type it in. Ideals. Okay, I can work with that as well for this character. Their bond. I'm not sure why the bond table is doing that. In fact, it's totally off screen, but part of it is anyway. Okay. Makes sense for this character. He's going to record his life. He'll have to store them somewhere, though. And what is his flaw? That would be considered an evil one in this particular case, and I don't necessarily want that. Yeah, okay. That actually is probably close to me. Alright, I'm going to make him chaotic good. His deity is going to be Mistra. And now we can close the Sage tab. Alright, he is male. Age, let's put him at 22. Height, let's go 5'11". Weight, we'll put him at a scrawny 160 pounds. And his size will be medium. If you want to look for the deities, they're under the player's handbook, under the reference manual. And they're in the appendices, typically. And right there, Gods of the Multiverse. Now, for magic users, there are a number of options that you have here for the case of the Forgotten Realms, and that's where I'm going to base this particular character out of. But I already know who this particular wizard is going to choose, and that is going to be Mistra. You can't, unfortunately, drag and drop that particular god into place. But yeah, and she's neutral good, so she'll accept a chaotic good person, but her sphere is knowledge, and that's exactly what this particular character is going for. But she could have also chosen Ogma, but that's more of a religious choice as opposed to a magical choice. Okay, so we are actually almost done setting up this character. The next thing to do, we've already got those done. We've got our bond, blah, blah, blah. You can put in a description that you can read out, for example, to other players so that they can get an idea as to what your character looks like. And it's a really good idea to put that in there if you're really looking to flesh out a description for your player. Interestingly enough, no traits. We have some proficiencies and we have all of our languages chosen. In fact, I think this character is now done. So this is how to set up a level 1 wizard in Fantasy Grounds. And I am going to break this character out into additional videos that will cover the individual schools, partly in preparation for I will most likely go through all of these schools. But I'm going to start off with evocation, so I will probably skip all of these ones here first and go right to evocation. I may not. I may start at aberration, but we'll see. But this is how you set up a base class, specifically the wizard's class. You're at level 1. You are now technically ready to begin your adventuring. And there's really nothing else you need to do.